And to discuss the Christian genocide claims in Nigeria, we're joined by geopolitics analyst Yemi Fajemisin. He joins from Glasgow, UK. Good evening, Yemi. So we see that Kanu has described himself as a prisoner of conscience and accused the Nigerian government of complicity in attacks on Christians and, of course, Igbo people. From an international law perspective, how significant are these allegations, especially his claim of extraordinary rendition from Kenya?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Quinn. Let's do a bit of background information around these things. So we know that Kanu is a Biafran separatist, which is the eastern region of Nigeria that wants to carve its way out of the country, mainly because of aggravations along marginalization. So what we also know was that he fled to Kenya, and he was kidnapped to Nigeria in around 2021 by the Buhari regime. So what I would say is, first, because the oath case is still in the court of law, it will be a bit unprofessional for me to make extensive evaluation on the issue. However, what I can say is this: the kidnap of Kanu himself from Kenya to Nigeria, you don't need to be a lawyer to know that that's against an international law. That's not done. So what usually happens in that framework is there's a due process to follow with these things. Many countries have extradition treaties amongst each other, so which can be followed. But the Buhari regime then decided to kidnap him into Nigeria, which is clearly against the law. And if we pay attention to history very well, we should know that Buhari himself has done that before in 1984 when he tried to kidnap Diko into Nigeria. Diko was meant to be drugged and transported through a crane into Nigeria, but that plot was foiled by the British government. So what Kanu is saying in this context is absolutely right, in the context that it is against the law to forcefully bring an individual back into the country when there are due processes to be followed. Like many countries have different extradition treaties that can be followed to bring him back. So in this context, yes, I think he's definitely got a point.
We see that Kanu was writing a letter, and in this letter he has mentioned groups like Boko Haram, ISWAP, and the Fulani militias as threats to the Judeo-Christian communities. How does this align with the broader security challenges Nigeria is facing currently, and could this narrative influence foreign policy decisions?
Cool. There's a point to that, because we all know Nigeria at the moment has got very complex insecurity issues. So we have the Boko Haram, we have the ISWAP, and you have the Fulani headsmen issue as well. And I think in order to really answer that question, it's important to look at the fundamental, the genesis of these things. So we know, for example, that one of the things that's actually fueled the Boko Haram issue is years of neglect and lack of education around the northern region of Nigeria. So these things have made it very easy for fighters to recruit vulnerable people. And you also have a case of some politicians being sympathetic to their cause, because these politicians are trying to use that to gain political gain for their vote for themselves. So that's another dynamic there. Then you have the Fulani headsmen one that's been going on for decades in Nigeria around the Plateau region. So one thing or two things that's made those things worse over the course of time is, number one, you have a climate change. So I don't think Nigerian government officially has even they are recognizing the fact that climate change has got a part to play with the Fulani headsmen issue, because most of these people just want to graze their cattle, and they end up encroaching on the lands of the farmers. So we have climate change there. You also have one thing people don't tend to speak about, which was the war in Libya, after the war in Libya ended. Because one thing was, before the fall of Gaddafi in Libya, he had a lot of mercenaries from different African countries. And after the fall of Gaddafi, most of all these fighters fled with a lot of ammunition and heavy power weapons. And because the African border is very porous, most of these fighters made their way into Nigeria as well. Because we've seen the cases of where Fulani headsmen attack villages in Nigeria. Some of the victims have alluded to the fact that some of them spoke a very different Fulani dialect. So we've not been able to establish that this guy is actually from Nigeria. Because Fulani is spoken in different African countries, in Niger, in Guinea, in Mali as well. So you have a case of different things going on that Nigerian security forces have not been able to actually establish all the facts. So most people are just guessing. So we need all these things to be established by the government officially. But to your question, yes, there's a larger impact in terms of security within Nigeria and also outside Nigeria as well.
This particular situation has caused, a lot of people to focus on Nigeria, especially the U.S. President Donald Trump. But of course, reports is saying that President Trump has ordered the Pentagon to prepare for possible airstrikes in Nigeria. Can you tell us how credible this is, and what does it tell us about the United States' intentions towards Nigeria?
Yeah, that's quite interesting because Nigerians are actually one of the one of the countries that love Trump. And there's a research recently I read that said 79% of Nigerians actually agree with the Trump administration. So, but in context of what Trump is saying, I personally don't think we're going to see any airstrikes in Nigeria from Trump. If at all we're going to be seeing any airstrikes, it's probably going to be around the Lake Chad basin, where a lot of jihadists seems to be hiding. So I don't see, what we could see is maybe possible sanctions, maybe from the Trump administration to Nigeria. And again, that's complicated as well because there's a lot of foreign direct investment from America to Nigeria. So there's a lot of that's another dynamic there. So it's a dicey one, but I don't personally see any airstrikes on Nigeria. It's just we shouldn't forget that Nigeria is not the only country Trump is labeled as a possible country of concern. There's China there, there's Russia there as well. That is claimed that these countries have been persecuting Christians. We shouldn't forget that the Trump administration made the same allegation against South Africa regarding the genocide of white South Africans, which turned out not to be true. We know for a fact that Nigeria, there's insecurity in Nigeria, but this insecurity is also affecting Muslims as well. So I'm quite shocked as to why this discussion is basically around Christian and non-Muslims. So that's what the Trump administration believes. But in a wider sense, I don't think we're going to see any airstrikes in Nigeria. We may see sanctions. We may see maybe possible limited airstrikes around the Lake Chad basin, but not anything significant.
Thank you so much, Yemi, for giving us your views. And of course, this is still ongoing, and we'll keep uncovering and hoping there are no airstrikes, but see how best these situations can end. Thank you so much for joining.